Hello, happy Friday. Camera's over here, right? So my boss let me go home from work early today, which I very much appreciate because it gave me some time to read, which is very appropriate given what we're talking about. I haven't made one of these in a while, and honestly, it's pretty awkward being back in front of the camera. I don't like it, but you asked me to start making videos, or you were like, hey, it would be so much fun if you had more of these videos, and I was like, I have a tripod and a camera, and I'm in the middle of a bunch of books that I have opinions on, so why not make a video for you? I sound so unsure because this feels so strange again, but who cares? Anyway, I mentioned I'm in the middle of a bunch of books. If you look on Goodreads, it says that I'm in the middle of several more books than these, but I'm not gonna touch the ones that I haven't actually picked up in over like 2 or 3 months, because those are technically still on my currently reading on Goodreads, but I'm not currently reading them. So we're just gonna maybe cover a little bit of the ones that I'm actively reading. You may notice there are lots of flowers in my life at the moment. It's springtime. I want flowers. I want to be surrounded by flowers. It's a good time up in here. And these aren't all the flowers that you will see, to be explained very, very soon. So 2 of the 3 books that I'm currently reading are together in the Game of Tomes, kind of wrapped up together. So I think that I will handle those last. I'm going to start with the oddball of the 3. Okay, so this is one that I have been reading for the past handful of weeks, and I'm really close to being done. I'm close. I will probably finish it tomorrow. I was hoping that I could finish it today, but then I did take a nap. It's not gonna happen today. This was loaned to me by my brother. He recommended this book to me. This is not the first time that I had heard of Leslie Newbigin. I read Newbigin's commentary on John, like the Gospel of John, last year when I was teaching at TNBS, and it was amazing and changed my life a little bit. And the way that he used language and the way that he understood John and could communicate it in a way that was so special and meaningful was amazing. Brandon happened to have this book, which is also, at the same time, it's pretty relevant for my job, and Brandon gave some raving reviews about it. I just got up to close the window because I am afraid that my voice carrying outside will make me sound insane. So anyway, this book, it's pretty self-explanatory what it's about, and the cover itself is quite ugly. I do hate it. It's not good. Sorry to the whoever designed this. It has his name on the back, I'm not gonna say. Sorry to this man. But the content of this makes it all worth it, above and beyond. It's kind of ridiculous. At the same time, it's a little difficult. Luckily, the negative side of that has kind of gone away as I've gone through the book. At the same time, it still is really slow going. I'm really interested by what all that he's saying, but that's the problem because I keep stopping like every 15 seconds. And that sounds like an exaggeration. I don't think that it is. To pick up my phone again, kind of take the text, like a picture of the words, and then translate it into text on my phone so I can put it into Notion and put it in the book notes for this book. I'm doing that constantly because the quotes are so good. I'm gonna have to like find one and read it. I don't know, because it's crazy. Newbigin is an Anglican missionary. Yeah, he was a British missionary, pastor, apologist, theologian, and ecumenical statesman. I definitely see that, the whole ecumenical part. Maybe I'm feeling that because I've been drawn towards because I've been drawn towards Anglicanism in the past couple of years. Maybe I feel like he's ecumenical, but maybe he just is. It says it on this book, so it must be true. He was a bishop of the Church of South India, so he lived in India for a long time. And so he has some really interesting things to say about living in pluralist societies and cross-cultural societies, doing missions. It's really hard to summarize everything. I think the reason why I felt at first that it was so dry and hard to get through, I was saying to Brandon, I felt like it was because the book is more philosophical than things that I've usually been reading lately. Brandon says that the word for it is epistemological, but I like epistemology, but maybe he's right, that's the word. It's entirely about how we are discerning what is true versus not. That's way too reductionistic. It's about what is true and how we tell what is true when there are thousands of approaches to discovering what is true and interpreting what is true in a society like ours. Because take, for instance, American culture is influenced by its time, post-Enlightenment, and its place that we are in the West and we're directly affected by the Enlightenment. And then also the fact that we are the melting pot that we are, that there are approaches from all over the world, technically, that are living amongst each other. But at the same time, there's this overarching way of approaching reason and truth and values, worldviews. There's so many people that are actually coming to the table with the same pre-assumptions and the same worldview that's actually incredibly individualistic and sometimes consumeristic and entirely dependent on the person as a means of knowing what is true, which is strikingly different from the majority of human history. The way that we are raised up and trained to see and interpret the world is very different from most of human history, which is just wild to think about. And he's talking about a little bit, he addresses some of how can we even come to an unbiased place of what is true when we are inherently biased, no matter who you are. Some of his critics mention, like, you can't describe the bus when you're sitting on the bus. You can't objectively talk about the bus when you're sitting on the bus. Things like that. And so we're talking about how we can make exclusivist claims about the gospel, which we do, and we must, as adherers to a very specific story that's rooted in history and rooted in the person of Jesus Christ, and all of the truth that God has revealed in specific times and places to specific people. There are exclusivist claims that this places on us, but also pieces of inclusivist claims, and it's really hard to summarize this book. I will just say it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it to read. This is one that immediately when I finish this, I'm going to be buying a version of it for myself because it's so dang good. And like I said, the book notes that I've been taking are ridiculously long. Oh, here's the more flowers that I was talking about. Put it closer. Spider ward. Some of Newbegin's ecumenical approach is really appealing to me because I think he's a lot more willing than the average author to criticize everybody, but not in mean ways, but just in ways that open our eyes to things that we have been blind to, just because no one has ever brought it up to us before. Newbegin, actually, what I read this morning, he put language to something that I've felt for a long time, but didn't know exactly why or how to put language to why I didn't like this thing. This morning I read a part where he is criticizing the question that people often try to ask non-believers to get them thinking about spiritual matters, which is where you're going to go when you die. This is very much a condensed version, but I'll read to you a couple of quotes of what he says. He says, I want to affirm that this is the wrong question, and that as long as it remains the central question, we shall never come to the truth. And this is for 3 reasons. First, and simply, it's the wrong question because it is a question to which God alone has the right to give the answer. I confess that I'm astounded at the arrogance of theologians who seem to think that we are authorized, in our capacity as Christians, to inform the rest of the world about who is to be vindicated and who is to be condemned at the Last Judgment. There's been an odd reversal of roles here. And he says, I find this way of thinking among Christians astonishing in view of the emphatic warnings of Jesus against these kinds of judgments, which claim to preempt the final judgment of God. Nothing could be more remote from the whole thrust of Jesus' teaching than the idea that we are in a position to know in advance the final judgment of God. It would be tedious to repeat again the innumerable warnings of Jesus in this matter, his repeated statements that the last day will be a day of surprises, of reversals, of astonishment. In his most developed parable of the Last Judgment, the parable of the sheets and the goats, both the saved and the lost are astonished. Surely theologians at least should know that the judge on the last day is God and no one else. He says, the second reason for rejecting this way of putting the question is that it is based on an abstraction. By concentrating on the fate of the individual soul after death, it abstracts the soul from the full reality of the human person as an actor and sufferer in the ongoing history of the world. Once again, we have to insist that the human person is not essentially a soul which can be understood in abstraction from the whole story of a person's life. And so he often talks in this book about how history is integral to our faith, not just a history of 2,000 years ago, but even our personal history of being a participant in the world. He talks about the other end of the spectrum is of the materialists and behaviorists who want to explain the human person simply as a bundle of physical activities. If we refuse both of these forms of reductionism, then the question we have to ask is not what will happen to this person's soul after death, but what is the end which gives meaning to this person's story as a part of God's whole story? He then goes on for his third reason. It is that the question starts with the individual and his or her need to be assured of ultimate happiness, and not with God and his glory. All human beings have a longing for ultimate happiness, and the many worldviews, religious or otherwise, have as part of their power some promise of satisfying that longing. We must believe that this longing is something implanted in us by God. He has so made us that we have infinite desires beyond the satisfaction of our biological necessities, desires which only God himself can satisfy. Our hearts are restless till they find rest in him. The gospel, the story of the astonishing act of God himself in coming down to be part of our alienated world, to endure the full horror of our rebellion against love, to take the whole burden of our guilt and shame, and to lift us up into communion and fellowship with himself, breaks into this self-centered search for our own happiness. It shifts the center from the self and its desires to God and his glory. It is true, God forgive us, that Christians have turned even this into something that they thought they could possess for themselves, that they have privatized this mighty work of grace and talked as if the whole cosmic drama of salvation culminated in the words, for me, as if the one question is, how can I be saved? Leading inevitably to the question, how can anyone be saved? But this is a perversion of the gospel. For anyone who has understood what God did for all of us in Jesus Christ, the one question is, how shall God be glorified? How shall his amazing grace be known and celebrated and adored? How shall he see the travail of a soul and be satisfied? There's so much more. I already read way too much, but you get the gist. The way that he's able to talk about things, that's just one, that's like a page of what he's talking about. And there's like 250 pages of this, so you can imagine. Okay, I'm gonna quit talking about that for now. Let's move on to Game of Tomes. So I have not been actually doing the Game of Tomes, or at least not the official one, for the first half of the year because I didn't really care to read Magic Mountain or East of Eden. Sorry, maybe later. There are so many unread books on my bookshelf that I was like, I should read those. The ones that I own, the ones that I bought with the intention of, I'm gonna be the kind of person that reads this book. So I'm gonna make that come true. The one that I read in the first quarter of the year was Anna Karenina, And now I'm reading the Iliad. I was never forced to read this, which I think is a kind of injustice. I probably would have thought the reverse. I probably would have thought that reading it was an injustice when I was in high school, because I did not appreciate literature at that time. But now I view it as an injustice. I do not think that I got a full education. And not only because of this one, I'm not saying just the Iliad would have given me a full education, but I didn't read Dante's Inferno. I didn't read, what else does everybody read? Heart of Darkness or The Scarlet Letter, random stuff like that. I've been filling in my bookshelf with things that nobody forced me to read in school. But the Iliad, I love it so much. What the heck? I love it. I don't think it's gonna be like favorite of all time kind of book, but I am really surprised by how into it I am. I thought that it was gonna be pretty boring. That's so stupid sounding. No, well, it's really old. You just kind of assume that things like that aren't gonna capture your attention very well. I've tried to read Ovid's Metamorphoses or The Golden Ass over the years, and I read little parts of it and I'm like, I don't think that I could take too much of this. But I was immediately really into this. I am currently, you can kind of see here, not too far, but I've been moving really fast. I am at the beginning of book 7. I'm giving myself 3 months to read this. I don't think that I'm gonna need 3 months. I think I will need under a month. I think this is gonna be like a Brothers Karamazov situation. Or, no, I was gonna say Anna Karenina, but I think Anna Karenina took me a couple of months. Things were pretty busy a couple months ago. So, the Iliad, I don't know if you've read it. We didn't talk about this. In case you haven't, if you have, I'm sorry for this, you could skip. But in case you haven't, the Iliad is a precursor to the Odyssey. So in the Odyssey, we have Odysseus, who is dealing with the aftermath of the war. He and his men are stuck out on the sea for a lot longer than they intended. This is the war that they were fighting in. And this is when Odysseus was in his prime, along with, gosh, everybody. Achilles, Agamemnon. I don't think I knew the name Menelaus before this. This is Paris and Hector. This is the story of, Helen and all the craziness that happens surrounding her. I have just heard bits and pieces of this over my lifetime, and now everything is starting to make sense because I know who Paris is, and I know who Helen is, and I know who Achilles is, kind of. He hasn't been in it so much. He got really offended at the beginning of the book and he went off to pout about it. I feel really bad for him. I don't mean to minimize that, but I haven't seen him in a while, but I liked him when he was in it. I did have a friend tell me, though, that I'm not gonna like him as much later. That same friend also said that Hector was her favorite. I am interested in Hector so far. And this will mean nothing if you haven't read it, but perhaps you have read it. Weird thing about the translation of this one. I bought this book maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I like that it has the, I don't even know what these are called, the kind of striated, they're not fully flush pages. I forget what that's called. I'll figure it out. I like all these things. I neglected to look inside and pay attention to anything. So when I picked it up last week, I was kind of surprised to find that the translation is real weird. For example, Achilles. Let me show you kind of how it's spelled. Can you see that? Oh yeah, focus. You can also see, unfortunately, one of my nails got ripped off the other day. Achilles is spelled like that. How strange. And that's like, most of the names have weird, I call them extra letters. I'm sure that this is a more traditional translation. But everything is spelled differently. So all of the research that I did before reading this book on all the names and the places and like the names of the armies and the cities that they come from are all spelled differently. So not only am I reading a really old and difficult work, but my brain's having to do that extra layer of translation. But it's okay. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy read, which is really weird. I didn't expect that, but maybe I should, because I read a lot of older things, and Tolkien is my favorite author. Not to say that Tolkien and Homer are the same, but I have maybe a higher threshold of, ability to read high-level things, i.e. the Silmarillion, and I'm really enjoying it. Like I said, I'm going a lot faster than I imagined. I would have been further than this, but I am back on watching through The Chosen this week because we watched the first couple episodes in theaters on Sunday, and I'm going to see more tomorrow, and so I've been rewatching the show from the beginning this week, and it's taken a lot of time away, so I actually probably would have been a lot further than this if I had had some more self-control this week, that I don't. I think that I heard in my research, or I found that the book is mostly about rage. It's about anger, and you see that from the very first line. The very first line, at least in English, says, "Anger be now your song, immortal one, Achilles' anger, doomed and ruinous, that caused the Achaeans loss on bitter loss, and crowded brave souls into the undergloom." Apparently that's supposed to set the stage. The entire book is about the destructive nature of anger and how it's going to lead to the death of a bunch of people. So really uplifting, really exciting, but it's written beautifully. I'm really into it so far. Surprise. Okay, last one that I have been reading. So for Game of Tomes, I, made up my own couple of books for the first half of the year, and then I'm going to go back and join everybody else in the second half of the year with Silmarillion and Babel. But I added one more just because I love a challenge. Let's call it that. That's the charitable version of what I'm doing to myself by reading this guy. I'm giving myself all 12 months of the year to read City of God by St. Augustine. This has been sitting on my shelf since my last semester at DTS, so a couple years. We read this much for DTS. Can it see? We only read that much, and it was just for my class on eschatology, and it was like half a book, or maybe a whole book or something like that. But now I'm reading all 22 books, and the way that I decided to take it is 2 books every month, so that's what these tabs are for, and I currently have read the first 3 months of the year, so I've read through the 3rd tab, and I will be starting book 7 the next time that I decide to pick it up. It's been going okay. Between this guy and this guy, I am so inundated with Greek and Roman, ancient Greek and Roman culture. I guess this isn't like ancient. It's pretty old, but this is taking place in, I should give context. This is taking place after the sacking of Rome by the Gauls in 410 AD. And yeah, I should give more context. What I'm going on about stuff without even telling you. I feel like most people might know of this, but don't really have a whole lot of context. So City of God is a response to the pagans who, after the sacking of Rome, attacked the Christians, or accused them of, this was your fault. This is because we became a Christian empire under Constantine. This is the gods' retaliation against us. This is our punishment. And Augustine's coming back and being like, are you kidding? Heck no. And he takes this many pages to say it. Because everything that I've read so far is entirely just dragging the pagan gods, if you will. It's been entirely about, your gods suck. For one, they're not even real, and here are the reasons why. And even if they were real, here's the reason that they are terrible gods, and they're the complete opposite of everything that you claim to hold to virtue-wise. And it doesn't make any sense why you would want to follow those gods when you're attacking Christianity for certain things. Like, you have double standards by following these pagan gods. That's all that it's been about so far, and I don't think that it's gonna stop anytime soon. I am 250 pages in, and it's entirely been about the gods and the depravity of Roman culture. It's also fun. The timing of this has been really interesting because I was in Rome. Wait a second. What's today? I was in Rome a month ago. And so I had already read some of this, I had some context, and then I got to go back to Rome. And just fascinating to have this you know, adjacent to what I was seeing in front of me in like the Roman Forum and the Colosseum. But I will say, eventually it's gonna get a lot more interesting for me as like a theologian, because sometime, I wanna say around maybe book 10 or 12 or something, he's gonna start going methodically and in order through creation to throughout the events of the entire Bible in order, and eventually dealing with eschatology, with last things last, which makes sense why this is here near the end of the book. And then obviously it all comes back to the title, the city of God. The entire book at its most basic element is he is separating these two cities, the earthly city and the heavenly city. The earthly city being the civilizations of mankind, all of this depravity and the fallenness and the powers and principalities that work in it, just the darkness of the earthly city. Versus what he will go to, what he's already kind of hinted at and will definitely be doing so more later on in the book. The heavenly city is, of course, the city of God. It's the city that Revelation, the end of Revelation, talks about, that new Jerusalem that comes to the new earth, right? The new heavens and the new earth. We're talking about the city where God is fully at peace with mankind, you know, and we are with him and we can see him without separation, without end, all those beautiful things of the last few chapters of Revelation. So we're gonna get to some really amazing places. It's just slow going, but I will be there. By the time December comes, I will be there. Okay, so that's basically the end. I hope you were interested. Is this what you wanted? I feel on the spot, but it's okay. The stuff that you do for friends. I hope that you're having a beautiful time in life, in springtime, in my father's world. This is my father's world. He shines and all that's fair. That's been running through my head a lot, as well as, of course, the lyrics of Andrew Peterson, Mission House, Jon Guerra. Today's the day that Jon Guerra released his newest album, the one that I texted you about this morning. Oh my god. Oh my god. We are being blessed this spring with good music and honestly pretty good weather. And green outside my window. Should I show you tree? This is what I've been looking at the whole time. I should turn more so you can see more of tree.